welcome onto the podcast. It's good to have you on. If you just want to start off by introducing yourself and tell us a bit about your business.
Of course, my name is Charlie Fitzgibbon. I'm the founder and managing director of Edinburgh Construction. As the name suggests, we're a construction company, but I suppose, as the name doesn't suggest, we don't just work in Edinburgh. We're across the Central Belt currently. We are exploring projects in London and in Europe, but our central hub is Edinburgh. We are a principal contractor and also a property developer.
How did you sort of first begin the business?
It wasn't so much by design. I've been in construction most of my meaningful career. I left school very early on. It was shortly before I turned 16. I realized school wasn't for me and I exited as soon as I could. I was always quite handy. As a child, I was always doing various projects, and leaving school, I didn't fully understand what I wanted to do. Towards the end of my school career, I think the teachers started to notice that as well, and I was politely pushed, out the door. So off I went into the big bad world, kind of figuring what I was going to do next. And construction really appealed to me, and I was doing a few different things and I took a few jobs. And when I started to get in and amongst construction sites and see what it was about and meet some of the guys working in construction, I was seriously hooked. I was dramatically drawn towards the prospect of a career that allowed me to travel. My dad was an engineer and he worked on ships. As I grew up, I had the luxury of having stories of, exotic places and working abroad, the rest of it, and that always stuck with me. And I remember taking a job for a Belgian guy. He had a sort of SME carpentry business, and he took me on as a labourer, and he travelled a lot, and it was just like a mind opener as to what you can learn a job and you can go travel and you can get to go to all these cool places. And that's what I ended up doing. And I worked for almost 10 years across a few different jobs all around the world. I kind of lost track as to different places that I worked, and progressed from my trade up to site management, got into construction management, ended up client-side project management, working for a fantastic company who taught me a lot and I learned a lot. And then in my mid-20s, figured, it was time to do something out on my own. The role that I was in was quite client facing, so I had quite a decent exposure to developers, to client side builders, the full breadth of the industry. And I thought, that's something that I could probably have a crack of on my own. And I liked the idea of the autonomy and doing things for yourself. In 2017, decided to come back to the UK and started Edinburgh Construction. Here we are.
What inspired you to develop the business? Was it all the traveling?
In terms of wanting a business, I like the autonomy. I always felt working for somebody else, you're just building somebody else's dream, and I'm not a materialistic person, but I vividly remember in my previous role in my career, we had clients that would, you'd be putting your blood, sweat and tears into a project, sometimes literally, and the client would come round in their Bentley or their, private helicopter, and they'd spend about half an hour on site, shake your hand, and then go. And I guess I was just drawn to what's that all about. There's this whole other world out there. It kind of played on my mind a lot. I think since starting in construction, I was completely obsessed about learning everything that I could about the industry. I was, from day one as a labourer, I was on site surrounded by all these guys doing all these things that were completely alien to me, using machines and tools and speaking a language that was complete, Greek to me. And I was just enthralled and I wanted to learn more and more and more. And I guess that never stopped, and it bled out into the business of construction. And I started to get curious about, okay, who are the clients? What's their businesses? Why are they doing this? It just never ended. So I was drawn to exploring that further, and I think that's what led me to starting my own business. It's because I wanted to continue my own journey. I've never been one to shy away from throwing myself in the deep end. So I thought, well, what better way to learn to do it yourself? So that was a key driver. And then the autonomy as well. It's a nice feeling to get up every day and be the decision maker in your life, I suppose.
And when you started, how did you find your first set of customers? Did you go back to people you'd known from when you were working for somebody else?
There was a lot of that. there was a lot of people that I'd already built a rapport with in the industry who were encouraging me to go out on my own. And when I did, they jumped on the opportunity, and I had I guess, could be very grateful for the fact that I hit the ground running, because I had a lot of people that were ready to hand me work. So there was that, but that only gets you so far, you know. And I didn't want to be, you know, a one-man band contractor, freelancer, consultant. I wanted to build a business. I was always adamant that I wanted to build a team. You know, in order to do that, you do need to go out, you do need to seek business, you do need to be a little bit aggressive in putting your face out there and talking to as many people as possible. I think was probably the biggest thing. You know, you just talk until you're sick of hearing the sound of your own voice, and try and meet you can, and shake as many hands as you can, and give as many business cards as you can. And you know, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs, but every now and then one of them comes right, and it could lead to your next step in building your business.
You were talking about building a team. How did you sort of go around building the right team?
It's been a big challenge, and it continues to be. I'm still trying to figure that one out, if I'm honest with you. At the beginning, I definitely got it very wrong. I think what was a classic mistake of, I started hiring people that I like, and that was their kind of only reason they got a job. I like spending time with them.
Rather than people who are necessarily the best.
Exactly, yeah. Rather than people who are suitable for the job. So, you know, you'd meet people, you got on with them, and you'd offer them a job, and I don't think I've ever had a positive outcome from that logic. So I think recruitment's a real difficult one. And if someone out there's got the answer, I'd love to hear it. But I think finding people that share your values as a person, not just as a business, you know, people that believe in ethics, you're speaking the same language, you're not trying to convince people of what you see for the business, and what your vision for the company is. And that's reciprocal, because the rest of the team want to be in an environment that resonates with them. So it's got to be both ways. People that are people's people, I think, really important. That's something that I've learned. You could have someone that has on paper ticks all the boxes, the best credentials, more suitable than anybody else for their job. However, if they can't gel with people, if they can't get on with the rest of the team, if they rub people up their own way, it's a complete non-starter. So it's a bit of a balance, it's a bit of a juggling act, and it is hard. And I think, and it's very important. I think you need to hire the right team, particularly when you're starting out, because it can literally make or break you. But I think people who are decent, who are honest, who share a passion for the industry, they've got to care about what they do, is so important, incredibly important. And then I think that after a little while starts to build a bit of momentum, and it sort of self-perpetuates, and you start to develop a culture that people want to be a part of. You know, you have to, I guess, sell the dream a little bit less.
And did you do all the recruitment on your own for yourself, or did you go to an outside company, a recruitment company that would help find people for you?
A bit of both. To begin with, I did it all myself, and it was at the very beginning, I was just hiring people that I met, you know, people that I bumped into, or people that I was rubbing shoulders with. And when I realized that wasn't working, I thought, okay, I need to get a little bit more sophisticated at this. I've used recruitment companies with a lot of success. I've used recruitment companies with horrific success. Using a recruitment company doesn't mean that your problems are solved and they're going to hand you all these fantastic candidates. However, it is helpful, you know, and I think with any professional service or any professional third party, you do want to build a relationship. You do want to be supporting them just as much as they're supporting you. And recruitment agencies can be very helpful. They're not the be all end all. I think we still employ a lot more people off of our own backs and through recruitment agencies, but there certainly is a place for them. And particularly in construction, which is very labor intensive, you need a good recruitment company at your side, because you can't do everything yourself. You know, you need people that's what they're, from the moment they wake up to the moment they clock off, is what they're involved in.
So obviously recruitment is a big challenge. What were some of the other biggest challenges and struggles you faced when you started up the company?
Everything. I mean, it's a very unforgiving territory starting a business, particularly if you're serious about it. You know, if you really want to do well, it's very unforgiving. And I think you've got to get very real very quick with yourself. You need to learn what you're good at, more challenging. You need to learn what you're not good at, and use that as a bit of a North Star, and steer where you're going. So a lot of looking at yourself, a lot of kind of self-development without getting too wishy-washy about it, because I know there's a lot of buzzwords slung around these days about this and other, but you do need to be very self-aware, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and then understand how to double down on your strengths and how to fill the gaps in your skill sets and bring people on board that can support the vision, support the business, which is far easier said than done. I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong in a business, and you're never going to fully mitigate every single risk, because there's external factors in the environment that can swoop you up without you even noticing and take you elsewhere. But the more that you armor yourself, the more that you protect yourself, the more that you develop yourself, the more resilient you are to these things. So I think knowing what you do very well is you need to know your game. You need to know it inside out. For me, spending 10 years working for other companies was me just basically honing my craft. And then when you
That must have helped.
oh, I think you can't fool anybody. It's you either know what you're doing or you don't. And I think there's a lot of fake it till you make it kind of stuff, which is a kind of phrase that I really don't like. I think you need to know what you're doing. You don't need to know everything, and you never will. But if you're running a business, you're offering some sort of expertise, and you need to be a professional in that sense. So I think struggles is probably what I'm getting at. As the struggles is really just all roads lead to understanding yourself, where you're at in your career, where you're at in your game, and being honest with that. Business throws up situations that will make you take a hard look at yourself, and if you're not prepared to do that, then it's probably going to go south very fast.
Did you create a business plan when you were first starting off? Because you hear about all these people who don't. Some people just go for it, and some properly plan it out.
I did create a business plan, and I think it's a useful thing. I don't think I ever read it after I wrote it, to be honest with you. I can't recall a time where I've actually gone back and referred to it, but I think the process of writing it, if nothing else, is a useful exercise. There's so many different methods to start running, growing, operating a business, and there's so many contradictory methods. And I think there's no right or wrong way, because, like you just alluded to there, there's some people say, just go out and do it, and the lean method, you'll figure it out along the way. Or there's the other people which say, you plan everything to a T and follow that strategy and just get your head down and do the work. I think both are true. It depends on you as a person, what's going to work for you, and what do you want to get out of it. What works for somebody else might not necessarily work for you. I think it's a useful exercise to try these things. I mean, I read all the books, I studied up, and I just did what resonated with me. In terms of business plan, I did write one. I think it's very useful, but it's not the be all end all. I think it's something that needs to be revisited. In fact, I'm currently working on our third revision of Edinburgh Construction's business plan. It's something that never ends and
constantly changing.
It does. It really does. And I think there's a risk if you're too much in the mindset of, setting out a plan and following that plan no matter what, you miss opportunities. You can have the blinkers up. And sometimes if you're so fixated on a particular goal, you might charge down a path and miss a lot of peripheral opportunities and equal a lot of risks. There could be a lot of risks that present themselves. You need to be agile. Just look at the past 3 years and how the tides can change so quickly. If you're fixated on a specific plan that's going to lead you to success, it's probably not accounted for all the external factors. So
you don't want to restrict yourself.
Absolutely.
When you started off, did you have anyone you went to for advice? Did you know any other business owners at the time that you could go to sort of help you in that first stage?
Yeah, I actively sought out people that were doing what I wanted to do and were three, 4, 5 steps ahead of me. So I tried to associate myself with those types. Similar to kind of getting experience, it's you can stand on the shoulders of giants, and it's obviously you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn from them, but it's better if you're learning from somebody else's mistakes. So I think seeking out counsel and more experienced people in the trade or in whatever sector you're in is just invaluable and probably a must. I'd say that's probably the most useful. And again, lots of people are going to give you loads of advice. You're probably going to ignore 95% of it. But that little golden nugget that finds its way through could be what just propels you that little bit further. So I think, yeah, finding people who are doing what you're doing and they're ahead of you, just being, a little bit humble to the fact and soak it in.
Did you do any networking? You hear about a lot of people going to sort of networking events and trying to do that at the start. Did you do any of that, or were you just trying to push on your own?
No, I did. Again, it's a must. I'm not a natural networker. I'm a bit more of a, like, I like to just kind of hustle and get on with it, and kind of, I'd rather be on sites, and got my boots on, my hard hat on, rather than kind of going around some hotel business center with a name badge on, shaking hands with accountants and tax advisors. But it is a must, and I can attribute a lot of success to just networking. Um, you never know who you're going to meet, where it's going to lead. We've won clients, we've won partnerships, we've won funding, we've won all sorts of things just through chat to folk. And I think, looking at my own kind of journey and trajectory, I'd say the fact that I kind of left school early, I was traveling a lot. It kind of forces you to be a social person. This isn't an insular world, business is a community, and you can't succeed on your own. It's a necessary must. If you enjoy it, that's great. If you're like me and you don't particularly enjoy it, tough. You just got to go do it. But yeah, it's there's too much on the table to not get around a network, and there's no excuse nowadays. There's so many institutions and so many people organizing events, and some are better than others. Don't get me wrong. Um, you'll find your mojo. You'll find what works for you and what resonates for you. And it's for me, it's one of those things that I sort of reluctantly make sure is in my calendar every month, but equally appreciate the value, and know that it's a must.
So you started off with sort of smaller clients up in Scotland, but you mentioned that you have clients over Europe.
Yeah, we're exploring lots of things. I mean, my background was working internationally, so it's a comfort zone for me. Previous career, at one point, I was involved in 6 different projects in 6 different countries. So that's a world that is very difficult, but it's not too scary for me. I've not necessarily sought out international work, but when things fall in front of you and you go, well, that could work, you explore it. And my business partner of mine is based in the south of England, and through his businesses in central London, I'm spending more and more time in London and getting more involved in his businesses in the south, and that's got some legs to maybe develop out. And then, yeah, there's bits and pieces in Europe. I don't like talking about things until they're solid. I'm not going to say anything just yet, but we're exploring.
You don't want to tempt fate.
Exactly. I'm not superstitious, but it's easy to talk, but actions is that, and the proof of the pudding's in the eating. So we're working on a few things in Europe that are likely to come to fruition. But for me, it goes back to what I said earlier about kind of what inspired me when I began, which is travel. And if you're not doing stuff that sings to your interests, what you're doing it for? So you got to have a little bit of enjoyment along the way and do something that.
No, having that experience of working internationally must have helped a lot, because I think a common thing we've heard from people coming on here is that scaling is one of the hardest parts of running their business.
Yeah, and it's a different set of rules. Like, what takes you from A to B is a completely separate set of considerations from what takes you from B to C, and that's been a learning journey of mine. Forget everything that's got you to where you're at today, park it, and you're in a different arena now when you're leveling up, and scaling is hard, and there's challenges that will come out from nowhere, and the risk level's different. When you're starting out, for most people, if it fails, all right, you gave it a shot, you gave it your best. When you start to establish something and you've got a large payroll, you've got clients that are dependent on you and employees that are dependent on you, and you've got something going, suddenly you start to go, oh, I've got a responsibility here to not let this drop. I think your level to risk changes.
Was that a big fear in the beginning, your business failing and not making it?
No, I don't think so. Um, I think you've got to have a lot of self-confidence, and I don't mean arrogance, but you need to believe in yourself and your capabilities. So I don't think I'm feared of failing, but again, it's a real possibility if you're not careful, and you need to have your eyes wide open. I mean, fantastic businesses go under every day. Nobody's immune from that, no matter how smart you think you are. Um, I think my personality type, I've never been fear of failure. I'm a believer that whatever happens, I'll pick myself up, brush myself off, and get on with it. But as your business grows, your risk level changes, your view on risk changes. The more you build up, the more you've got to lose. Try and not lose it, I think, is the aim of the game.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you'd known when you started your business?
Oh, we've talked a lot about it. I think recruitment, hiring the right people, is big. That I don't regret many things, but if I was to do things differently, I'd focus on hiring the right people to begin with. Then I'd probably be a bit further on in my business career. It's different for different people, and I think you need to be very, as I just mentioned, self-assured. I think when you're starting out, you've got a lot of people telling you how it should be done. Oh, if you want to be successful, you need to do this or read this book or follow this method or whatever, which is all fine, but you need to do it your way. I don't think I've suffered from that too much, but every now and then you do get influenced, by something or other. Oh, maybe I should do this, and you start to second guess your decisions or your job.
Were there any big influences in the beginning, good or bad?
You know what? I mean, I wasn't necessarily inspired by any particular person or any particular. I mean, there's lots of businesses that are respected. I've always been a huge admirer of anything of quality. And Edinburgh Construction reflects that. Like, we have standards that we don't waver from, and I've always been inspired by other companies that do that and achieve success, because it's a very difficult thing to do. There's easier ways to grow a business than focusing on quality. And I know fine well what a lot of businesses do, and a lot of the methods used to grow turnover and to gain market share. But that's not me. I think for my satisfaction comes from doing something that I'm proud of. So there's a few companies that I recognized were focused on quality, and a few Edinburgh-based companies that were focused on quality that I really noticed, and that resonated with me, and that was something that I wanted to aspire towards. And it's not just for the lovey-doveyness. There's a commercial element to that as well. But I'm not particularly inspired by an individual or this, that, and the other. I think it's more just values that inspire me, and quality and doing right, I think, is what gets me going.
Obviously, another big struggle for people when they're beginning a business or wanted to start a business is the financial aspect. In the beginning, was it tough financially? Did you get support?
Oh no, it's tough. Yeah, it's very tough. But you need to learn fast. You need there's no forgiving not knowing your numbers and not understanding where you sit financially. Cash is king, and you can have a tall stack of contracts on your desk with clients queuing up around the block to do business with you, which is great. But if you don't have cash coming in every month to pay all the bills, to cover all the salaries and wages and expenditures, you're going nowhere. So finance is huge. Finance is a relationships game. It's a trust game. You need to build relationships with the right people and do them a service. If you are entering the business arena without finance behind you, you need to be humble to that fact, and you need to build relationships with people that can support you, and you need to do them well. Because if you want to grow, if you want to scale, it costs, and equally you need to deliver as well, because if your business isn't profitable, it's a non-starter.
And what is it you're mainly doing just now when you're traveling around from place to place? Is it trying to grow the business or find new clients? Or
yeah, a lot of it's relationship building. So you know, a lot of what I do, you know, relationships take a long time to develop, and you put in the work now, you might not see anything for years, but it's just keeping active, building relationships. Like we said before, no man's an island. As also said, we do have some business down in London. We have financing down in London, um, and we have clients down in London. So, and we were talking earlier on about networking groups. So I do networking down in London because it is a hub, it is a hive. So you've got to keep your finger on the pulse. I like to kind of attend different conferences and trade shows as well to learn about what's upcoming in the industry, what are the current challenges that others are facing, and what solutions people are implementing to try combat those challenges. So you've got to keep a finger on the pulse, and that requires lots of mileage.
Yeah,
and
not cheap.
No, it's not, but it pays dividends. It really does. You know, it opens your eyes as well. I mean, you know, you don't know it all, and no matter, you know, I don't know about you or others, but I sometimes fall foul of thinking that I've got it all sussed out, and then you'll go meet somebody, or you'll go to an event, or you'll go to a conference, and you'll just realize how wrong you've got it, or you know how disillusioned you've got it. So I think it's a nice reset to go out, see what others are doing, and sometimes it's not the fact that you're learning what you're doing wrong, but sometimes it's reassurance that you're doing things right as well. If you meet half a dozen others doing the same thing as you and seeing some success, then there's a bit of reassurance there. Um, so yeah, I think it's good to be plugged in, active, seen in the industry. You know, people. It's nice when people recognise your face, because that can lead to other things.
That must be nice, having people see you and say, "Oh, that's him. He's done a great job for me."
Yeah, that's it. You know, it's a relationship business. Well, I think, let me rephrase that. Business is a relationship game, and you know you've got to be doing things with others and collaborating and helping others as well. I'm a big believer in give more than you receive. You know, and I don't mean that from a selfish perspective because it's with no intention. You know, I think it's just a good way to live life. If you put out with no expectations, it's a very it gives you a lot of freedom. You know, it's gives you the license to just go and be useful and be involved. And I think that's not a bad place to be. And you always learn at the end of the day, you know, by getting involved in different projects and different things. So yeah, I think it's critical. And it was something that I did at the very beginning as well. Um, very early days on in the business, you know, before we'd even incorporated, I was in London, I was in Birmingham, I was in Glasgow, I was in Manchester, I was like all over the place, literally all over the place. Just, like I said before, shaking as many hands as I could, meeting as many people as I could. You know, bear in mind I'd been out of the UK for over 10 years. Like I knew nobody, and I just figured out the quicker that I get myself up to speed, the better. So I clocked up a lot of mileage in the early days.
I bet you it's paid off though.
Yeah, definitely. And you never know where these things can go. And it's people talk about these chance encounter stories, but it's so true. Like, you know, you could be sitting next to someone in a hotel bar, or shake someone's hands at a trade show or a conference, or you know, just have a complete chance encounter. And fast forward 1 or 2 years, and you're doing business with them, and it happens all the time. And I just don't want to feel like I'm missing out on opportunities. So I think the more ground you can cover, the better. And yeah, it's I think it's if you want to grow and grow fast and grow successfully, I think it's a necessity.
We're talking a lot about growth. So in 5 years' time, in an ideal world, where would you like to see your business?
Oh,
It's a deep one.
it is a deep one, and it shouldn't be. It's an interesting question because if I look back at when I started Edinburgh Construction, with all my grand ideas, I'd be bloody impressed to see where we've came and where we've reached. I'm quite proud of that fact. And moving forwards, I just want to see more of what we're doing. Like I'm not greedy. I don't want to be the biggest house builder in the world. It doesn't attract me. Like I said, I'm driven by quality. So I do have some selfish traits in business, in that a lot of this I do because it's, I believe, the best arena to learn about yourself. You know, I'm a big believer in being the best version of yourself you can be, and what better way than every day throwing yourself into loads of difficult challenges, which is what business projects. So in 5 years' time, I just want to be doing more of what we're doing. I want to continue servicing the industry. I want to continue to deliver high quality projects. I want to continue to build a team who treat Edinburgh Construction as their own and are proud to be part of the company. That there's nothing that brings me more satisfaction than seeing the way that the team have completely absorbed themselves with Edinburgh Construction and how they feel proud of the business. And I just want to see more of that, more of what we're doing. Like I said, we're not reinventing the wheel. There's certain kind of new pathfinder trajectories that I'm interested in, like sustainability and sustainable construction is a passion piece of mine. And that's maybe less of a clearer path forwards because it's wildly unexplored and unknown. So I'd like to dive into that world further. Like I talked about before, I'm not a huge believer in having fixed plans. I'm more of a goal person. Like I've got goals, but goals can be very boring. You know, I could say, all right, I want to 10x turnover, which I do. You know, I do want to do these things, and I want to increase our margins, and I want to bring down our overheads, and I want to, you know, increase our delivery to our funders and our investors and make people happy. I want to hit all those targets. But if that's what you make your business about, it's a very boring place to be. I like to set those goals, have it in the plan. Okay, so year on year, I want to increase turnover by X, and I want to increase our net margin to gross margin by X by Y, and that's all fine. That's a huge part of our forward planning. But I don't like to advertise that too much because if that's what your business is driven by, you know, good luck to you. You know, that's somebody else's game. It's not mine. So I think if you're asking me as a person, it's doing more of what we're doing, making more clients happy, being professional, you know, because it's not always about making clients happy, it's about delivering the best job. And those two things don't always go hand in hand. And you've got to be real with clients. And it's not being a people pleaser or just doing whatever it takes to make someone feel happy. So I think if in 5 years' time I'm still doing that, I'll be a very happy person.
I was going to ask you, what's most important to you in your business?
Being of value. I don't say this lightly because I've been involved in previous careers in some businesses that are not of value. They're more of an energy sink than a value add. So someone that a business that enters a client space and delivers something of value that they didn't have before is a simple thing to say, but maybe a rarity to observe in the world, because it's very easy to make money by doing wrong by people. And you know, we in our little journey, minute journey to date, have had plenty of opportunities like others to kind of step on others' heads and get ahead, but it's not why I entered this. So I think what's important to me is being value, and probably a simple way of putting it is sleeping easy at night. You know, I like to have a good night's sleep, and I had a conversation
Yeah,
with,
who doesn't?
well, yeah,
Yeah,
but it's a funny thing because business is stressful. It is stressful, and you can only get comfortable with stress if you're doing it for the right reasons. And I'm a person that I like to think I've got good values and I'm doing things because I believe it's the right thing to do. I think the second that I lose that, I've failed. And it's a funny thing because that's not necessarily linked to business success in the traditional sense. You can demonstrate a successful business that's isolated from upholding good standards. But for me personally, the second that there's a dissonance between the business and doing things right, I've failed. And that's the path that I've chosen. And I find that a fun position to be in because you can take that in so many different ways. We talked about sustainability, that's one thing. Quality is another thing. Design's another thing. Building a employee space. We in Edinburgh Construction, some of the other staff members are more involved in it than I am, but huge indicators in mental health in the workplace, and we're doing a lot of work to try and promote strong mental health, and we're involved in more than one charity within that space and trying to bring awareness to the fact. So it's all these things that it's not the traditional measure of a business, but it's one that brings me a lot of satisfaction. And as I said before, where it all began was quality and admiration for quality of product. So in 5 years' time, I want to still have that solid link and not be tempted into driving the business in other directions.
You touched on that a bit there, but there's obviously a lot of pressure and stress that comes with starting a business, running a business. What do you do to sort of manage that?
It's hard, I've had times where I've seriously doubted myself, And I think if you're not in those situations, you're not really running a business because it is a painful process, particularly for ambitious, which is an annoying trait of mine, is that I'm highly ambitious. And you push yourself into positions that are just not fit for human habitation, if I'm perfectly honest. If you're serious about driving success, it's an uncomfortable place. So it is a steep learning curve. You need to be very resilient to pressure. I think I'm quite fortunate because construction in its nature is very pressurized. It is a stressful environment, there's deadlines to meet, there's high costs involved, a group of lads bunched up in a small space, you fall out, you have fights, all the rest of it. It is a difficult space to keep a level head. But, your ability to deal with stress is a muscle. It's like going to the gym, you develop it, you get stronger at it, you get better at it. So I think there's no substitute for pure exposure. But at the same time, you need to look after yourself. You need to be doing the basics. I'm the worst culprit for letting the kind of basics go. Sleep, eating well, working sensible hours. Like I break all the rules, but it's not a thing. It's really not. You need to take a moment to ground yourself. It's something that I've got to learn and grow in, is doing a better job at taking a moment, taking a breath, all that stuff. But it is tough, and I think you just need to get comfortable and not listen to the noise is another thing. And I say this to members of our team, is the better you seem to do, the more people seem to want to pull you down, and people talk and people say nonsense and people come up with stuff that you just think, where the hell did you get that from? Like, what is that all about? And you need to develop the ability to just switch off. It really is. There's a lot of noise that can scramble your head if you let it. And I think it just comes down to a little bit of confidence, so self-esteem, confidence, all that stuff. And it's easier said than done. There's lots of good books out there, lots of good material. I'll mention the Lighthouse Group charity. They're someone that we're really proud to support, and they work specifically in the construction sector, promoting mental health within the construction sector. But they've got tools, they've got an app. They run a campaign called Help Inside the Hard Hat, and we've been blown away by what those guys are putting out there. And more of that, please. More people kind of working in that space to offer tools and support on mental health, because it's a real issue, and something that we see far too well, because the construction sector is a very, for lack of a better word, gruff environment, where you know you don't sit in a construction site canteen and talk about your feelings. It's not what's done. So I think that's an exciting trajectory that I think sector's going, is a bit more awareness in mental health. And I think as business owners, it's easy to forget, because you're the one that everybody's supposed to look up to. And everybody does look up to, and everybody comes to you for support. And when they've got their problems, you're the person they come to. And that takes a lot out of you. If your days are spent reassuring people or putting out fires, whatever, it takes a toll, and you start to feel that there's no space for you to, be going through your own situations. But I guess realizing that that's okay and that's normal, and that's just part of being a human. Forget being a business owner; you're a human being at the end of the day. We all go through stresses, and finding comfort in that is important.
Was it tricky at first having that responsibility forced upon you, working from yourself, only being responsible for yourself, to having these people looking up to you to be responsible for them?
Yeah. It's a bittersweet. There's a heck of a lot of responsibility, and it's tricky to learn the most effective method of dealing with that responsibility, because the immediate reaction is you want to be, the kind of shoulder for everybody to cry on, or the arm to put around everybody's shoulder. But sometimes that's not what people need, and that's one thing that I love about being a business owner, is you're always learning. And one of the rabbit holes that never seems to stop is people and people management, and giving what you deserve. And yeah, it's not easy, but you've got to do it. Is it? I've Is it a difficult thing to have that responsibility? I don't think so, because no matter what you do, if you're working a job for another company, you've got that same responsibility, whether you're aware of it or not. I think just, we're all a family member, a colleague, a friend, a father, a mother, a son or a daughter, whatever, a brother, a sister, whatever it might be, and that all carries the same sort of territory of responsibility. So it's just part of being human. As a business owner, I don't think it's any more responsibility, but you certainly need to start to think about how you approach it, because it can get quite tricky to deal with certain situations.
And with running a business, obviously, that's all your time filled. Do you still manage to keep a good work-life balance, or can it be tricky at times?
The honest answer is no, I don't. I'm trying to get better at it. I'm the worst for just working stupid hours, and it's awful, because I tell all of our staff to be sensible with their time, take holidays, take weekends off, don't answer your emails, all the rest of it. But when the buck stops with you, I mean, every day you wake up to emails and voicemails and text messages with people screaming for your attention, and it's nothing against them, because they're just doing their thing. But it's very difficult to switch off from that when there's people that need you, and the consequence of your attention to them is impactful. It's very difficult to switch off. And I'm a sucker, because I don't relax well. I'm not one for like sitting around doing nothing. I get restless. So yeah, it's one that I'm figuring out. If you get someone on your podcast that's got the answer to this, I'll be listening. But yeah, it's a difficult thing, because but there's an old boss of mine, actually. It sounds very simple when you vocalize it, but it is very true. And he said to me, "There's nothing that can't be done tomorrow," and that was always resonated with me. I mean, it's very easy to fall into the trap of, "Oh, I've got this to do, I've got this to do, I've got this to do, this to do," and then you kind of um, you start to lose sight. You're kind of too close to the fire. You can't see the woods for the trees. Even in a pure commercial sense, if your head isn't on a macro level, if you don't have a bird's eye view, you're going to miss so much. So it's important to withdraw and take some time to reflect, because if you don't, you're guaranteed going to be missing out on things that's intrinsic to the success of your business. So for me, that's how I've kind of duped and convinced myself into closing the lid of the laptop, switching off the phone, because it's in those moments where you do have some sort of realizations and some thinking space. So I like to read is my thing. I like to listen to audiobooks. I like to read, and that's my escape. I used to have a lot of hobbies that I've had to sacrifice, but I used to be competitive in motorsports. I don't have the time for that anymore, but I do like to take the motorbike out on the odd weekend and just detach from it all. For me, that's my complete detachment, because when you're sitting on a motorbike, you can't answer the phone. Well, you can now, you've got headsets, but in my world, anyways, you can't answer the phone, you can't check your messages, you can't check your emails. And funnily enough, it's those moments where I have my best ideas. So yeah, it's no matter what way you look at it, taking time out is important. The sooner you get comfortable, the better, no matter how hard that might be as a business owner.
I think trying not to reach burnout and taking some time to recalibrate your mind can do all the good, can't it?
It can. I've done it. In a previous job, I worked for a company for a while that the more you did, the more they put on your shoulders, and I did burn myself out, and I ended up in hospital for it for almost a month. So it's a real risk, and it's a horrible one, because when you're used to being in an environment where you're contributing and you're working and you're striving to achieve things, to have that carpet pulled from underneath you and be kind of immobilized and stuck in a space is a frightening space to be. You know, it's almost like they thrust you with the medicine that you deserve, which is, okay, now you're forced to sit here and think about things. So burnout's very real, and it's not something to be taken lightly. I've came across all kinds of encounters with colleagues and various professionals who have burnt themselves out and ended up in some tragic places, and it's no fun, and it's not something you'd wish upon anybody.
On a closing point, you mentioned you like to do a lot of reading and listening to podcasts. What podcasts and books would you recommend to anybody else, particularly those wanting to start up a business or have already started a business?
I was about to say, there's this new podcast called the Edinburgh Podcast the Edinburgh Business Podcast that I heard quite a bit. So personally, I'm quite a fan of biographies of just anybody, like anybody that you've seen in your life, and this is a very personal thing. Anybody that you see as a figure that you inspires you, or has qualities that you believe in. I think just listening to their story makes things real. I mean, there's more business books and self-development and professional development books than you can care to name that are all full of fantastic quality content. But for me, there's something very real about listening into the context of someone's life story. One I've just finished is Dave Grohl's book, I think The Storyteller, I think is what it's called. And you might not necessarily think, oh, what's that got to do with business? I think people forget that all businesses is, you strip it all back, it's people behind it all. And whether you're a business person or a musician or whatever space you're in, there's similar traits there. And I think there's a lot to be valued for kind of looking outside of the kind of ring fence sector of business books or professional development books, and just looking at great people doing great things. I get a lot of satisfaction about learning about great people that have done great things. So I'm a sucker for biographies. That's my soft spot.
Well, it's been great having you on.
Likewise.
I'm sure people will take loads from this.
It's been a lot of fun chatting shop with you.
Well, thank you. Cheers, Charlie.